The wind was hot and dry that day in Bondoku, a small village tucked quietly in the Muhao province of Burkina Faso. The sun had just risen over the dusty rooftops when a boy was born. His cries loud, his fists tight, as if he had already seen the weight of the future. His mother, away, whispered the name Ibrahim, not knowing that this very child would one day rise to change the course of a bleeding nation. Ibrahim Traore's early years were not filled with luxury. In fact, there was barely enough food for the family. His father, a farmer named Seydou, worked long hours in the fields just to put millet and maize on the table. But even at 5 years old, Ibrahim had something different. He listened more than he spoke. He watched people with sharp eyes. He asked questions that even grown men couldn't answer. His mother often said, "This boy has the heart of a lion," but the silence of a wise king. The village was filled with stories of past warriors, of betrayal, of colonization, and of suffering. Ibrahim would sit by the fire every night, listening to the elders, and something grew in him, a fire, a belief that Burkina Faso deserved more than poverty, corruption, and fear. At school, Ibrahim was not the loudest or the strongest, but he was the most disciplined. His teachers noticed his brilliance in mathematics and strategy. He was a natural leader. When bullies targeted younger students, Ibrahim would stand in their defense, never with violence, but always with words. "Strength is not in your fist," he once told a classmate. "It's in your purpose." After finishing secondary school, Ibrahim shocked everyone. Instead of leaving the country like many of his friends who had dreams of France or Canada, he stayed. He joined the military. Some called him crazy. "You will die like the rest," they warned. But Ibrahim had a different vision. He believed the army was not just a place of guns and violence. It was a place to protect, to rebuild, to restore. In the military academy, he was always the first to wake, the last to sleep. During his training, he met Mariama, a young nurse volunteering for the Red Cross. She was graceful, educated, and fearless. Their love grew in the middle of chaos. While Ibrahim studied warfare, Mariama healed the wounded. It wasn't long before they married in a small ceremony under a mango tree, with drums playing in the background and the village celebrating as if they were royalty. They later had 2 children, a boy named Musa and a girl named Aka. Ibrahim promised his wife one thing on the day their son was born: "My child will never cry because of the sound of gunshots, not while I'm alive." But peace didn't come easy. Burkina Faso was burning from the inside. The northern regions were falling into the hands of terrorists. Villages were disappearing overnight. Schools were shut down. The government, full of weak promises and foreign influence, seemed helpless. Ibrahim, now a rising captain, began to see what others feared to admit. Corruption was eating the nation like termites in a wooden house. Soldiers lacked food and weapons. Commanders were pocketing money meant for security. The people were losing hope. Then, in 2022, the final straw broke the camel's back. A group of terrorists stormed a school near Jibo, killing young children. Ibrahim was there minutes after it happened. He held the hand of a dying boy who whispered, "Tell my mother I'm not afraid." That night, Ibrahim didn't sleep. He stared at the sky for hours and made a decision that would change the country forever. He began meeting in secret with loyal soldiers, men who loved their country more than their rank. They planned, they prayed, they prepared. The goal wasn't power. The goal was rescue. On September 30th, 2022, the world woke up to shocking news. Ibrahim Traoré had taken over the government in a coup that stunned both local politicians and foreign observers. But unlike past coups filled with greed, this one felt different. The people danced in the streets. Mothers cried tears of relief. Old men raised their walking sticks in the air. Finally, they said, "A son of the soil has stood up for us." But power, as Ibrahim would learn, is a heavy crown. He moved into the presidential palace not with joy, but with caution. The halls were quiet, filled with secrets and shadows. Files hidden, deals signed with foreign hands. Birkin of gold, oil, and land sold to outsiders while citizens lived in hunger. Ibrahim called for audits. For the first time in years, officials were being held accountable. He declared war on terrorism not with words, but with boots on the ground. He ordered soldiers to defend schools, to rebuild roads. He visited IDP camps, kneeling beside mothers and orphans, promising that help was on the way. But as he rose in fame, enemies grew in the shadows. Threats came from abroad, powerful governments who didn't like his new direction. Media outlets called him a dictator. Some claimed he was inexperienced. Others whispered that he was too young to rule. But Ibrahim stayed silent. History, he told his wife Mariama one night, would answer them for me. And while the world watched, something even more personal was brewing, a secret his enemies didn't know. Something about his past that he had buried deeply. A betrayal from someone very close to him. Someone who once swore loyalty, now plotting quietly in the shadows. One morning, before sunrise, Ibrahim was sitting alone in the garden behind the presidential residence. The sky was still dark, and the air was cold. He had just come from visiting a mass grave in the north, where dozens of innocent villagers had been slaughtered by militants. The cries of the mothers still echoed in his ears. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He hadn't slept properly in days. As he stared into the trees, his chief security officer approached quietly and handed him a sealed brown envelope. "Sir, we found something troubling," the man said, avoiding eye contact. Ibrahim opened the file slowly. Inside were surveillance photos, secret meetings, whispered conversations, coded messages, and then a face he knew too well. Captain Idris, his old friend, his brother in arms, the man who had stood beside him during the coup, the man who had held his newborn son in the hospital room, now caught on camera exchanging secret files with a foreign intelligence agent. Ibrahim's heart broke in silence. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, with a quiet voice that sounded like a storm building from beneath the sea, he said, "Bring him to me, alive. No one else must know. Not yet." While his personal life was shaken, the burden of the nation grew heavier. Across Burkina Faso, attacks were becoming more coordinated. Ibrahim suspected infiltration, moles within the system. He tightened security, rotated generals, and began working closely with civilian leaders, especially the youth. He believed they were the true soldiers of the future. One of the biggest challenges was his family. Mariama rarely smiled anymore. She missed the days when her husband was just Ibrahim, the calm soldier who kissed her on the forehead before going to work. Now, he was the president, and every kiss felt borrowed, like a loan that might not be repaid. Little Ika, now 8, once asked her mother in the kitchen, "Mummy, why do people want to hurt Daddy?" Mariama looked at her and said softly, "Because he's fighting monsters that wear human faces." But the pressure was also growing from outside the country. Foreign governments, those who had long treated Burkina Faso as a silent colony, began to withdraw aid. Some started funding local rebel groups, hoping to destabilize Ibrahim's rule. They said he was too patriotic, too independent, too dangerous. But Ibrahim didn't bend. Instead, he turned to other African nations, building a regional alliance based on unity and mutual respect. Meanwhile, the investigation into Captain Idris took a dark turn. Evidence showed that he was not acting alone. There was a network deep, old, and well-funded. It stretched into the former government, big businesses, even international NGOs. The rabbit hole was deeper than anyone imagined. And then, a bombshell. An anonymous voice recording was leaked to the public. In it, a man with a gravelly voice spoke about a plan to assassinate Ibrahim Traoré during a peace summit in Bobo-Dioulasso. The voice was disguised, but the plan was clear: place explosives under the stage where Ibrahim would speak. The file was sent directly to the presidential email with a chilling message: "You have walked too far into the light. The shadows are coming." The summit was only 3 days away. Ibrahim called an emergency meeting. Only 5 people were in the room, including his wife, Mariama. She had never been invited to a military briefing before, but this time was different. "They are not just trying to kill a man," she said. "They are trying to kill hope." With cold eyes, Ibrahim looked at his team. "We are not cancelling the summit," he said. "We're going. But this time, we will be the ones watching them." The stage was rechecked. Drones hovered overhead. Snipers were positioned in nearby buildings. Ibrahim stood before thousands of people, his voice strong, his presence unshaken. And just as he finished his speech with the words, "Africa must no longer beg to breathe," a sudden sound split the air. Gunfire. 2 shots. People screamed. The crowd scattered. But it wasn't Ibrahim who was hit. It was a sniper, one of the traitors taken down by the president's elite guards just seconds before pulling the trigger. The second gunman escaped through the chaos, and in the confusion, a third was captured. But what shook Ibrahim the most wasn't the attempt on his life. It was the identity of the third man. He wasn't a soldier. He was a journalist, one who had been following Ibrahim's rise since the beginning, one who had even interviewed him just a few months before. And when questioned, the man whispered something that made the president's blood turn cold. "You think you're fighting men, but you're fighting an empire." That night, as the lights of Bobo-Dioulasso flickered like weak candles in the wind, Ibrahim sat alone with a map of Burkina Faso on the table. His hands traced the borders. His eyes were tired, but his heart was still full of fire. His children were asleep. His wife was watching from a distance, silently praying. And outside, the people waited not for another speech, but for the next move of a man who had become a symbol of their deepest hope. But Ibrahim knew something now, something he hadn't known before. The real war had just begun. For the next several days, the country was tense. Ibrahim ordered silent raids. Dozens were arrested bankers, former ministers, even some religious leaders, quiet puppets of a larger, invisible hand. Files were unsealed. Weapons caches discovered in warehouses pretending to be humanitarian depots. But Ibrahim knew he couldn't fight this war with bullets alone. He called for a national reawakening conference, a historical event that had never happened before in Burkina Faso. Tribal leaders, youth groups, soldiers, farmers, teachers, mothers, and exiled voices from across the country were invited. No one was too small. No voice was too weak. The goal was clear. Let Burkina Faso define itself for once without foreign pens. At the conference, Ibrahim spoke with a voice that shook the hearts of men and women alike. We are not a poor country. We are a rich land with stolen dreams. For too long, they've told us who we are. For too long, we've fought each other for crumbs, while others ate the bread. But no more. I am not your king. I am not your savior. I am only your mirror. If you see courage in me, it is because that same courage is already inside you. Rise with me not to serve me, but to serve the land that gave us breath. The conference changed the nation. New policies followed. Gold mines were reclaimed. Schools reopened in conflict. Zones with armed teachers, former soldiers, now educating the next generation. Farmlands were protected by local defense units trained by the military. The national anthem was revised slightly, now ending with the words, "And we shall never bow again." Ibrahim's image became more than just political, it became spiritual. In villages, children drew his face on walls next to Thomas Sankara. He was called the son of Sankara, the flame of Faso, and the young lion. But Ibrahim never forgot the cost of all this. His best friend was now in prison. His own life had become a daily target. His wife Mariama, though proud, lived in quiet fear. And his son Musa once asked him, "Papa, when will you stop fighting?" He looked at the boy, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "When your children can walk to school without fear. When your sister can speak in a room and not be ignored. When you can tell your children that their country is free and you don't need to whisper." And so, the fight continues. Not with just guns and guards, but with books, unity, and truth. Ibrahim Traoré may be young, but his heart carries generations of pain and generations of hope. He stands not only for Burkina Faso, but for every African child told they were too poor, too black, too weak, too late. He stands for something that can't be assassinated. A new beginning. To every African youth watching this, the time has come. Stop waiting for heroes from the sky. Stop thinking power only belongs to those with crowns. You are the power. If Ibrahim Traoré, a boy from dusty Bondoukou, could rise with purpose, what's stopping you? Pick up that dream. Build that village. Guard that truth. Speak that word. Lead from where you are. Because if Africa is to rise, it won't rise from palaces. It will rise from people like you. Now go and become the fire.